Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into some completely wild, honestly pretty harrowing intelligence straight from the front lines. We're going to break down the internal mechanics of a military disciplinary structure that is literally collapsing under its own weight. We're talking about a system designed to force troops into combat that is actually, well, creating the perfect recipe for its own destruction. So think about this for a second. What actually happens when soldiers fear their own commanders more than the enemy? It's a dark paradox, right? But based on the recent reports we're analyzing today, this isn't just some hypothetical question for a philosophy class. It's the daily reality on the modern Russian front line. We're witnessing a massive structural breakdown where these brutal fear tactics used to control convict recruits are backfiring in just the most violent ways you can imagine.
Section 1. The Commander Killer. Rearming the Threat.
Okay, let's look at this timeline, which comes directly from the testimony of a captured Russian soldier. It's almost hard to wrap your head around. So, during a previous deployment, this soldier was dealing with such extreme, constant abuse that he actually shot his own company commander and burned the body to hide the evidence. He gets caught, arrested, and sentenced to 8 long years in a maximum security prison. You'd think, case closed, right? Well, no. The Russian Ministry of Defense literally allowed this convicted officer killer to just walk right out of prison, sign a brand new military contract, and head straight back to the front line fully armed.
The biggest takeaway here? By knowingly rearming a guy who already proved he's willing to execute his own officers, the system is really showing its hand. They are desperate. Finding new bodies, new recruits at any cost has officially superseded the basic, fundamental need to protect their own chain of command. It's a totally inverted priority system. And as the source data shows us, the danger of doing this was definitely not just theoretical.
Case in point, this next event brilliantly illustrates the fallout of that exact policy. Take the recent mutiny in the Kharkiv region. You've got a recruit who had just served a 12-year prison sentence before joining up. He gets assigned to the Rubicon drone unit, and then he just opens fire on his fellow troops. The fallout? 6 soldiers killed, 2 wounded. But pay really close attention to who the victims were. These weren't standard infantry guys. They included highly trained elite Rubicon drone operators. These are high-value specialists who are incredibly hard to replace, operating in critical offensive sectors. Just gone.
Section 2. A brutal system of control. Enforcing the front line. To really understand why elite specialists are being targeted, we need to define something central to this whole explainer: blocking detachments. Basically, these are military police and specialized units stationed directly behind their own frontline troops. And their main job? To arrest any fleeing soldiers and force them right back into what the sources literally describe as suicidal assaults. It is organized terror, weaponized as a motivational tactic. The entire system is built to make sure that turning back is just as deadly as pushing forward.
But, how do you even monitor a huge, chaotic battlefield to enforce this? Well, that's where those elite drone crews come in. See, the Rubicon operators we talked about earlier weren't just picked at random. These drone crews are actively used to monitor their own troops. If guys try to retreat or say surrender to Ukraine, these drone operators will actually direct artillery strikes right at them, or even fly FPV drones directly into their own men. They're essentially acting as high-tech executioners. So naturally, they become massive priority targets for troops who just want revenge or, frankly, a way out.
Section 3. Trapped on the battlefield. The impossible choice.
It puts the average soldier on the ground in an absolute psychological pressure cooker. The options are just stark. If you choose to advance, you're looking at suicidal assaults against heavily defended Ukrainian positions. But if you choose to retreat or refuse an order, you're looking at imprisonment, severe beatings, or outright execution by your own blocking detachments. The whole point is to convince these guys that neither retreat nor surrender is an option. So, think about it. What is literally the only logical survival tactic left when you're caught between the enemy in front of you and an execution squad behind you? You take out the guys given the orders.
And the intelligence makes it very clear this is not just a one-off thing. Take a look at this incident from the Zaporizhia region last year. A Russian soldier actually shot and killed his own grenade launcher platoon commander, wounding a sergeant in the process. It's a recurring systemic reaction to terror. When you fill an army with convict recruits and rely on abusive commanders to keep them in line through pure fear, eventually those soldiers are going to snap, stop obeying, and turn their weapons right back on the enforcers.
Section 4. Ukraine targets the enforcers, exploiting internal weakness.
Now, let's zoom out a bit to the macro geopolitical picture. Ukrainian forces have absolutely recognized this exact dynamic we're talking about. They know these blocking detachments are pretty much the only thing keeping unwilling Russian soldiers in the fight. So instead of just battling frontline infantry, Ukraine is deliberately hunting down the commanders and military police who enforce this discipline. For example, a recent strike intentionally took out a Russian military police armored vehicle in Russian-controlled Donetsk. By taking out these blocking units and disrupting their patrols, Ukraine is actively trying to make it easier for Russian troops to desert. It's a highly calculated move.
Section 5. The collapse of coercion. The feedback loop of failure.
Now let's pull all these pieces together, because this is where you see the true systemic collapse. It's a catastrophic cycle. I really want you to focus on these 5 steps, because it perfectly illustrates how the Russian military is actively building the machine that's destroying it. Step 1. These constant suicidal assaults just crush troop morale. Step 2. With morale gone, refusals and desertions spike among the penal recruits. Step 3. To stop the bleeding, Russia has to deploy even more blocking units. Step 4. Ukraine specifically targets and destroys those units, blowing massive holes in the disciplinary net. And Step 5. Those gaps make desertion easier, and when guys successfully escape, it just sparks even more mutiny. The harder they squeeze the recruits, the more the recruits revolt. It's a perfect, totally devastating loop.
And the ultimate strategic cost of this feedback loop is absolutely massive. Because of this internal rot, Russia is literally having to divert crucial resources. We're talking soldiers, vehicles, equipment, away from actual combat operations against Ukraine just so they can police their own guys. The commanders and drone operators are basically sitting ducks now. They're being hunted by the Ukrainian military on one side and the very Russian soldiers they're supposed to be controlling on the other.
Which leaves us with a really profound question to wrap up today's explainer. Can a military actually survive when its own disciplinary system breeds mutiny? Sure, we've seen how relying on fear and blocking detachments might work as a band-aid in the short term, but the source material we dug into today points to one thing. Over time, a system like this just eats itself from the inside out. When the enforcers become the primary targets of their own men, the very foundation of the military structure crumbles. I hope this explainer gave you a clearer picture of the intense dynamics playing out on the front line right now. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today, and I'll catch you next time.